Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me tonight. I've got a great guest on, somebody I think a lot of people have heard of, and I think I'm really excited to have him on here. David Reaboi, thanks for coming on, man. Or Reaboi, sorry, I got it right and then I got it wrong. Thanks for coming on, man.
That's good. No problem. Great to be here.
So David is a national security expert. He's also somebody who is.
Thanks for coming on, man. Oh, pardon me. Pardon me. We have boomer feedback.
Yeah, we got all the streams going, audio coming back. That's all right. So David is a national security expert. He is somebody who's very experienced in political communications, and he is a senior fellow over at the Claremont Institute. David, one of the things I was interested in asking you, just letting some more people come in. Yeah, one of the things that I always ask people when they when they come on is how they got started. It sounds like you have quite a varied background, a lot of different expertise. How did you end up kind of becoming this big Twitter personality after get involved with Claremont and everything?
Oh shit. The Twitter thing happened. I'm usually against new technology and new social media things. And I've got a friend, I don't want to get him in trouble, but I've got a friend who was saying, you got to get on Facebook, man. You got to get on Facebook. And I was like, everybody's on Facebook. So okay, I'll get on Facebook. And he was also told me, you got to get on Twitter. You got to get on Twitter. Everybody's on Twitter. And I was like, no, it's stupid. What's 100, whatever, it's 120 characters. Are you crazy? What am I going to say in 120 characters? Who wants to hear from me? But I ended up doing it in 2010. And at first I only talked about my subject matter, the things that were in my subject matter expertise. I was only talking about national security stuff. I was talking about terrorism stuff. And sort of gradually I just kind of expanded the nature of some of the things that I would comment on. And then, of course, I started with, food and music and all the other things that, bodybuilding and all the other things that I care about. And then it just kind of blew up. But that said, by the time it blew up, I had already been working in, politics for years. So I already had relationships with a lot of people who had very, very big accounts. So in some ways it was easier than if I just showed up.
Now, one of the things that I've been noticing a lot, and you were just talking about a little bit before we got started, was that Claremont's been doing a lot of interesting work. I think a lot of people who are watching what's happening in kind of the conservative right-wing space definitely have their eye on Claremont, and you're really starting to see a lot of pushback because of that. And so you've got a couple of hit pieces out. Was The Bulwark had one here recently, and then it was Washington Post. And so you've really started to catch some heat. What is it about what's going on at the Claremont Institute that really kind of has mainstream media gunning for you guys?
I think it's a bunch of things. Maybe in equal measure, maybe some things are more important than others. But the thing that I think is, there's what they say and what you believe are probably primary, kind of emotional motivations. And then there's also just, your basic, your basic hysteria from a bunch of people that, fundamentally can't grasp the state of the country. So I guess I'll take them one by one. So as far as the stated concern that they're coming from is, I mean, I don't take it seriously. We don't really take it seriously. With the Bulwark just had a piece by this woman, Laura Field. It was a 12,000 word article, which was helpfully put together into a 27-page PDF, which is the kind of the giveaway, which is, yes, this is for donors, print it out and give it to them and make sure that, no Claremont donors, that make sure the Claremont donors will be afraid of contributing next year, which, is just silly. Anyone who's donating to Claremont at this point is on board and is made of sturdier stuff than to listen to the Bulwark. But it was interesting because Laura Field turns out to have studied under Thomas Pangle, who's an East Coast Straussian with whom Claremont's Charles Kessler has had a long-running feud. And Pangl has been, there's East Coast Straussians and West Coast Straussians, which, that would take another show in itself. But Pangl has been going after Claremont since the 80s and going after Kessler in particular since the 80s. So this is like a second generational conflict already because this woman, Laura Field, is just, sort of coming from the Pangl school. And also, I mean, look, she's operating with a whole set of assumptions that are insanely silly. It's like, if you buy into them, okay, you buy into them. But they're not well articulated. They're just things that any normal, reasonable person should believe, which is that Trump is a fascist, and that he's a Nazi, and that the greatest sin ever committed in the last 50 years has been the questioning of the 2020 election, yada yada yada, on and on. And if you take this stuff as reasonable, then of course you're going to come down hard on Claremont. There's nothing in there besides that, these kind of insinuations, and it's a concern troll piece. The larger movement, which is, I guess part two, is that I think they're coming after us right now because they're angry. And they're angry and frustrated that, frankly, we don't break, and we don't throw our people overboard. There have been a number of hits like this. Dan Dresner at the Washington Post just does not stop going after Michael Anton. It's an obsession. We've had Dresner, we've had Damon Linker at The Week, we've had a bunch of these other guys who are just nonstop haters. And it's okay. I mean, we laugh them off. I think there's an increase in frustration now that they see that we're not going to abandon, folks. We're not going to say, okay, I'm sorry. We are now chastened. We're going to be on our best behavior, and that really pisses them off. It pisses them off because they're on the losing side. But even more so is it's a rebuke to the old way that they used to conduct business, which is, hey, you are tied to you, who's tied to you, who's tied to you, and you're all bad, and we can all call you, right-wing extremists or white supremacists or Nazis or Islamophobes or on and on and on and on. And that's been their method of political warfare for the last, going back for quite a bit. And the left has an entire infrastructure that's built in order to do this, almost like a supply chain, with different, different parts, different people and organizations have different responsibilities along the supply chain. So by basically sticking up our middle finger to these guys, it enrages them because it kind of short circuits the whole process. I mean, nobody can seriously look at Claremont and say that we're not serious people. Nobody can look at Claremont and say, that we haven't been in the fight, that we're newcomers who know nothing, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what they're going to slam us for, and we just smile and know that we're winning.
Yeah, I think conservative think tanks are supposed to draft white papers on why illegal immigration is good for the economy and just kind of collect their checks, right? And that's kind of what the problem with you guys is, that you're in a fundamentally different business, I think, and so they definitely feel the need to come after.
Yeah,
I think.
And we're winning. I mean, we're winning. Look, the other thing is that we don't mind shit talking, and shit posting and things like that. It's they come after us and we go after them. And I mean, one of the things that really pisses me off is this idea that these guys can, in a very genteel way, in their syndicated column, call you a Nazi. And it's your fault if you punch back and you call them a name on Twitter. Or you kind of, jokingly or dismissively question their manhood or something. I mean, I didn't make these rules. I think these rules are bullshit, and we kind of live by them. So that's another thing that really pisses them off is they're not going to get they're not going to get bended knee from us.
Yeah, the call of decency has been used to unilaterally disarm the right for a very long time, and you guys know how to scrap, which is something I appreciate. We definitely don't see enough. So, speaking of things that you guys will kind of talk about that I think a lot of the right is hesitant to talk about, you've really been hitting on kind of the expansion of the security state and the measures that the military is talking about, purging of the military of Trump supporters, the targeting of Trump supporters, and language calling them potential domestic terrorists, and the tactics being used, especially with Mark Milley, the chief of staff, the Army Chief of Staff. He's really been out there saying absolutely ridiculous things about Trump supporters and Trump himself. And there's a lot of implications to the language he's using, and the GOP is just nowhere on this. There's just no one saying where this is going. What do you think is the reason behind that language? What do you think this is a part of?
The reason behind the kind of insane resistance language that I'm not even sure the chairman understands is, let's say probably the most accurate word for it would be annihilationist. I mean, I think you said on Twitter that really the only frame of reference that we have in today's America is the 1940s. On both sides, we're still fighting the battles of the 40s. One side calling another side Nazi, the other side calling another side socialists or communists. It would be great to move on to another place where we can speak without these this old history weighing us down. I mean, the other side of the coin there with history weighing us down is that you just take what you want from it and you rewrite it. I mean, we saw Milley talking about the Reichstag fire as in relationship to January 6th. And it's like, look, all this rhetoric is designed to dehumanize. And it's really the worst thing that in 2021 America, you can call someone is a Nazi. And it basically means, okay, you're prepared for war. And you're prepared for war. You've got Antifa being compared to the D-Day invaders in Normandy. You've got every possible cultural and media voice going out and saying, yes, it's legitimate to punch Nazis. It's legitimate to, kill folks on the right. I mean, this is kind of where it's all going, and it's been building up to this for a long time. And I thought it was a huge milestone along the trajectory here for Milley to come out and to be speaking, to be really politicizing the U.S. military in a way that is not exactly, it's a bell you can't unring. And I think he's lost the faith of many folks in the service, and he should be held responsible by Republican members of Congress, by Republican leaders. Where the hell are they? I mean, as you said, these guys are concerned with Cuba. You know what? I'm concerned with Cuba. I'd love to see a communist dictatorship get it in the balls. I love it. I think it's great. And I think the Cuban people have suffered greatly over the last over the last, more than a half century. Okay, great. Where are you on this? This is infinitely more important. The U.S. border is infinitely more important. I can name you, half a dozen issues in America that are infinitely more important, but they're concerned about Cuba. And in some ways that makes sense. I give Rubio and Cruz, a bit more leeway because they are Cuban. So of course they're talking about this stuff. But other members of Congress and senators and political figures, they can talk about Cuba all day long because it costs them nothing. They get to they get to deliver talking points that existed anywhere from 1961 until yesterday. Republican talking points. And about anti-communism and freedom and whatever, they just brush out the old script and they go with it, and they know they won't get much pushback. It's cheap, it's lazy, and frankly, it's not. It's unfit for this political moment that we're in. And while it may be true,
yeah, I think it feels like the vast majority of the GOP is just treading water as much as possible to make sure the checks roll in, but don't have any. The number of people who are willing to actually try and lead the right seems to be countable on one hand.
Right. That's a great point. That's a great point because I don't think there's anyone in political life in the Republican Party today. DeSantis, he's got his hands full dealing with the state of Florida. But aside from that, I don't think it even occurs to any Republican politician that said, you know what, I want to lead the right in America. If America has a left and a right, shouldn't someone aspire to influence or lead? So when I say someone, I'm sure, of course, we know that there are a lot of folks out there who want to do it. But let's say someone in politics. Say, okay, I'm going to be elected to office and I'm going to lead the folks on the right. I want to do certain things with that movement. I want it to be certain things. Okay, who is out there who's interested in doing that? Who's got the ambition to go there? I don't know.
Well, and I think this is why Trump, for all of his shortcomings, is such a galvanizing figure for so many, is because he's the first guy who was not entirely led around by his nose by the media. He certainly did spend a lot of time punching back, but at least they didn't dictate 100% of the conversation for Trump in a way that they really do for every other GOP person. Like you said,
right.
You have all these massive issues. You have you have people, your voter base is being fundamentally threatened by the state security apparatus, and you can't be bothered to talk about it. You have, confirmed voter fraud. You have, the army shipping illegal immigrants to red states, and you're talking about the next fundraising cycle to win elections. Like, what are you doing? And so you run around from issue to issue, just dancing wherever the press leads you. And at least Trump had the ability to command the camera, pull the attention to an issue, to something like that. It's something that jarred a lot of, I think, the kind of the conservative institutions. Most of them couldn't handle it. Most of them didn't know what to do with it. This wasn't the script. It's not just liberalism going the speed limit. But at the same time, you're going to need somebody who's going to be able to do something like that, but more in a more disciplined fashion, if you want to have any traction.
Right. And look, I mean, as I agree with you on Trump, but even Trump, I'm not sure he had an idea in his mind. Okay, I'm going to hit the ball in this direction. I'm going to launch this media op by tweeting something.
Oh no, definitely no.
Yeah. And maybe two steps down the line, it's going to it's going to end up in my lap. I don't think he thought that much. He thought it through that much. Yeah. And I mean, as far as the people just taking money and taking money for their donors, and I don't know, I have maybe a less cynical view about it. Living in Washington for a long time. You have a less cynical view and a more cynical view, and the less cynical view I would say is that honestly, it's not that these people are on side and it's not that they're on side and they're corrupted. It's that they're dumb. They're just dumb. They listen to talking points from 2004 and it's good enough for them, and they're on board, and they're normie as hell. And it really takes a lot to get people to wake up. That's when your rare member of Congress or something shows some kind of let's say interest in alternate talking points, then all hell breaks loose.
Now, obviously, the battle over CRT is something that has also been pretty central to what's going on in the political narrative right now. And many of the same people who come after you guys are coming after any pushback against this, especially on the right. You see the David Frenches, these guys who just, this is free speech. Teaching critical race theory is the free speech of the teacher in the classroom. And it's one of those things where, once again, you just see them kind of, it feels like they're dusting off old talking points, but it feels like they're almost doing it maliciously. Like, you can't actually really believe that, right? I try not to attribute, malice, but it seems hard to believe that someone like David French doesn't understand what he's doing there. And so I wonder, with this battle, and obviously, like Chris Rufo being kind of the front and center of this, and all these different pieces talking about how he's creating a culture war, and he's just fabricated this out of thin air. What do you think is the appropriate approach with this? Because we're obviously seeing a lot of different factions of the right. Some think, obviously, like we talked about, French is going too far. Some think that the push against CRT isn't anywhere close to enough. What do you think should be the general approach in kind of skinning this cat?
It's a tough one. I mean, for sure, I don't think what has been done is enough, in the sense that I don't think necessarily it's going to, I'm not sure if we even have the resources to win this one. When people talk about CRT, as you know, CRT is a kind of helpful way to package a whole bunch of pathological insanity that has really been taken over. That has taken over the not just the classrooms, but the offices, and let's say, I mean, if you want, for lack of a better word, it has just completely taken over civil society in most places, and pushing back on it is going to be really, really difficult. And you're going to have to push back on it in certain places, and you're going to need a multi-pronged approach. So, I mean, first thing is dealing with education. Another thing is dealing with business. A third thing is dealing with it in government. So all these things are going to have to happen sort of, one after the other, or simultaneously. Unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to do everything simultaneously. And the most important one actually will probably be the business end. Is how do you get it out of business? You get it out of business by, something that I've been talking about for a long time, which is just basically ditch it. We need to create our own autonomous businesses that are expressly political for us, that will not have we will prevent from being taken over by, let's say, the woke crazies, or whoever you want to call them. And these things, these products, these businesses have to be unapologetically right wing. They just have to be, because if not, they will just collapse. conquest rule number 2.
And yep, I was just going to say, yeah, conquest law number 2. That I guess the trick with that, and I agree that obviously this is the pro. And I just had a guest on recently who made, I thought, a really interesting point about CRT. He said the problem with like extricating CRT from education or anything else really in society is, this kind of woke culture is basically the kind of the weapon of the elites use to cancel each other. It's kind of a key. It's kind of a key status signifier, your ability to navigate and properly wield this stuff against your enemies. And so even if you could get this out of a classroom somehow, which I'm doubtful of, just because this stuff's been taught in classes for decades, there's nothing new about this. We just now have a name to kind of tie it down. Right. But the problem is really digging it out of the ruling class, and it's got too much utility. It's too functional for them on multiple levels. With businesses, you have a little more control, right? But you're always going to run to the issue of the HR department, right? Even if you manage to start your own thing and make it as explicitly right-wing as possible, the law requires you to basically, in many ways, put a commissar in the middle of your corporation.
Right. So this is why, I mean, one of the things that I've been talking to friends about, and this is sort of beyond my area of expertise, but it would be great to put together a right-wing vision of what HR looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And create that as an alternative HR. I mean, if you're going to have an HR department, okay, fine. It's staffed by, a bunch of Claremont guys, or, right. or people who are kind of, squared away. And, because I mean, if you think about it, hey, there's avoiding lawsuits, let's say professional development and some of these things. I mean, in many ways you could make a right-wing vision of that. I don't think that's at all impossible. It'll have to be done. Something like it will have to be done, because because it's unsustainable to have, as you say, a bunch of, woke, crazy people running, even if you create a based business and then you bring in a woke HR department, of course, it's going to blow the whole thing up. So we're going to need to figure out a dance around this. And I think, frankly, based HR departments, it could be a thing.
Well, that's where you definitely need your parallel institutions to start cranking out people who can fill that role, right? People who are kind of trained up into how to properly navigate that and avoid any snags, I guess, would be
right. So this is the big thing. This is sort of the big meta thing, which is that I think what we do, or I'll just say what I do at the end of the day, it's public education. It's saying to people, hey, wake up. It's not enough for you to just go away and sit in a cubicle and do your work and do your thing, and maybe not care about any of this shit or whatever. You've got to contribute to the fight, and there's so many ways to contribute to the fight. If you've got a business, you're about to make a sneaker company. Hey, make a based sneaker company. Make sure to sell it to all the people who hate Nike. There are folks out there who would love to buy it. Make a better mousetrap. Just do it and expressly seek out and court these customers. Court us. I'm willing to send my money to folks that don't hate me, and I know millions of others are. And look, I mean, how many people voted for Trump? 72 million? That's approximately the population of France, give or take. Okay, France has more than enough. France has more than enough customers to sustain multiple industries just for the people of France. So, I mean, we can do this. It's not going to be easy, but it's a thing that needs to happen, not tomorrow, but at least people should start thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, I think that the business solution is something that comes more naturally to the right. It's something that a lot more people, I think, can have a vision of kind of having that, like you said, the base business with able to control kind of the inputs and be able to build around that. I think that well, that's certainly something that's got to be a key component, because we know the kind of power that those institutions wield. You know what woke corporations are doing right now. I think I think the larger problem though is the amount of cultural infrastructure around them that's going to always kind of inhibit some of that, right? I think that's probably where people are looking for the most change, and that's of course also some of the places where it's the hardest change. So it's no surprise that that's a different travel. But we know, like, even if you get your base company going, we already see examples of different payment processors and banks cutting off the accounts of gun manufacturers, ammo distribution companies, things like that. Anything that's not favored. So it's not just just starting the base business enclave. They're not going to leave you alone, even if you manage to like hermetically seal it from wokeness outside. And so I wonder, what other form of parallel institutions are going to be key to this, because I think if you don't have some other option, especially for higher education, some other place where you can really produce kind of a managerial class that is not tied directly into wokeness as like their defining feature of kind of their culture. If you don't have that going, then you just don't have the supply lines to staff up your super base corporation, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, this is a really big point, and it's a good one and an essential one. This is what we dealt with for 4 years under Trump. At the end of the day, he did not staff. I mean, I'm forgetting what the precise percentage is, but he left. He didn't staff. I think he staffed maybe half of what he could have. Part of that is, General Trump, inability to get anything done. The other part of that too is that, as you said, there's there aren't a lot of folks who are as the Red Chinese would say, red and expert, who are both competent and also on side. And those people have to be created, because we're not doing this without the people. At the end of the day, this is something that the left infrastructure, like activist infrastructure, understands far better than the right. And I know, because I spent the last 2 decades in the right's infrastructure. But on the left, they understand that, hey, this is all about feeding an army, and they're very happy to employ activists and just, okay, this guy's whatever, he's great on Twitter. Okay, pay him a salary just so he can do that, and there are grants for that. Which is on the right, you're trying to pitch a project, and you come in there and you say, okay, here's salary for 5 people. The donors will go back and say 5. Why not 2? And they will always fight you, and they will say, okay, well, can't we make these people contractors, or just whatever it is? They're happy to spend $10 million in a clip in a second for Facebook ads or TV ads or some other type of video bullshit thing. But if it comes to spending money for someone's salary, they will not do it, or they'll do it very begrudgingly. And that's the kind of shift that needs to happen. That's the kind of thing that needs to change. And it's not just in the nonprofit space, as you said. It's in the for-profit space too. And the other aspect is, education. Education is a huge area that we're going to need. We're going to need a lot of help in. And who wants to be? What kind of a normal person who's not completely out of his mind wants to go and be a teacher today? You're dealing with the unions, you're dealing with woke schools, you're dealing with all this stuff. You're going to be hounded out of a job if you have any integrity or brains or whatever. So you've got to find a place to go where you will not be run out of town for expressing your opinion. And and these things are going to have to happen. And I'm actually confident that they will happen because we're just not there yet. You know, I mean, talk people when it gets to be too painful, then people will, for example, stop using Amazon. People will stop using, some of the left's infrastructure and go and create their own. Once the digital infrastructure problems are going to be, let's say, better, maybe not taken care of, but we'll be in a better environment. For example, as you said, with the payment processors. Someone's going to have to do payment processors. Someone's going to have to do an alternate to Amazon Web Services, et cetera, et cetera. And once it gets to be too painful, there'll be more movement on this. But we're in the opening rounds.
Yeah, I think that is a big thing that a lot of people, there's those of us who kind of, to use your phrase, kind of know what time it is. They kind of see that corner come around, but most people don't have the level of pain necessary yet to really be moved into action. They don't truly feel it, and to some extent, I worry that moment might not come for a lot of people, but it will for enough, I suppose, eventually. One thing that is interesting, you mentioned DeSantis and how he is kind of attacking this thing, and his is a very interesting model because I'll be honest, I'm not particularly optimistic about change at the national level. I don't see how that works. I don't see how that top down comes at all. I think if anything positive happens, it happens by basically the people running this country are doing a very bad job, and they're having a tough time even managing that. And so they don't have a lot of resources to go off after regional guys who manage their stuff well, even if it bucks the trend. So I think if you're going to see big changes, it's going to come from guys like DeSantis, who just say kind of, F you, we're going to go do what we want. If you want to come after us, good luck. But, I'm just going to run this thing better than you are. Do you think that DeSantis is laying out a roadmap that of other governors or other kind of people might be able to build kind of regional support to push back against kind of what the Biden administration and others might be doing?
Yes. I think he's absolutely doing that. And though with the awareness, I mean, the caveat, which is that I don't think we've seen this roadmap, it hasn't come to fruition yet. So, for example, what is going to end up happening, and I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have a feeling you agree with this, is that at some point, there's going to be a really big fight between Florida and the federal government, at DOJ and what have you. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, we'll see how that plays out. But prior to that is you need DeSantis encouraging other governors to, stand up and fight. And I think that's happening. And what needs to happen is these guys, these Republican governors, number one is the bullshit, the detritus, the crap, the losers, they have to go. The Hutchinsons, the Kristi Noems. I mean, maybe Kristi Noem is chastened now after her acquiescence to the Chamber of Commerce. But the more people see DeSantis, and the more people see DeSantis's popularity all around the country as a hero fighting against this stuff, the more maybe Republican governors will stand up and say, okay, I'm going to try this because it's going to benefit me. And they're doing it, and DeSantis is doing it not in the most deep red state. I mean, Florida is a red state, but it's not half as red. It's not nearly as red as some others that have far worse governors. So I'm hoping this creates a kind of cascade effect that will sort of get everybody ready for when finally there is a kind of showdown between a state and the federal government. That we will kind of hopefully have our ducks in a row, or at least we'll have a better at least the game board will look better and more in our favor.
Yeah, so like I said, I especially hope that I know it's super optimistic to hope that that they're going to punch themselves out before that thing, before that comes together. But you do hope that with, like I said, the level of difficulty they seem to have at managing the country just the way it is, that they won't be able to, that the DeSantis or other governors who are able to put up that fight really will be able to, get the space, or it just won't seem like it's worth the fight, as long as, I mean, I'm sure it will eventually come to the head, but the longer I guess he can put that off, the more he has time to kind of build support and build up base and encourage other governors and that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, this is the thing that kind of what I'm always trying to remind my friends, which is that this shit is not static, and things change, and the environment can conceivably get better for us. And frankly, in some aspects, I think it's definitely getting better for us. So give DeSantis time. That's just what I want to say. Like give this dynamic time, which is the dynamic of Republican states being, pardon me, being fed up with federal government overreach and insanity. I mean, look, Texas, Greg Abbott, Tucker just had the story last night of the U.S. military flying illegals into the interior of the United States to resettle them. Where? Nobody has any idea. Okay, you're Greg Abbott. You can do something to put a stop to this. Does he have the balls? I doubt it. Would DeSantis have the balls? I think so. But hopefully Abbott can is looking at his self-preservation, and he's saying, you know what, I've got or his future or whatever, and he looks over and he says, I've got a Republican primary coming up for the governor slot. This is an issue that people care about, and he could stand up on it conceivably, or someone could stand up on it, and really all it takes is just more of these things, and we'll be in a better place.
Now, I know, I don't know if you know about my channel, but I do have done a pretty decent amount of kind of going through and explaining Curtis Yarvin's work. Mm-hmm. And Yarvin is somebody who I know he's been published at the American Mind. Obviously, like, he and Anton have been having really interesting discussions that I've really enjoyed, and I think are pretty productive. He's also, though, in his pretty normal way, shown a good amount of skepticism to the efforts of against CRT and that kind of thing, and certainly is not optimistic about the chances of kind of the bigger changes to the institutions, but without them kind of just collapsing in on themselves due to atrophy. What do you think of kind of, I'm not, like I said, I don't know how familiar you are, but I'm assuming you're somewhat familiar. What do you think about Yarvin's work and what he's been talking about? Do you think that that some of that is applicable, that it's just, I'm assuming that with the amount of dialogue Claremont has had with him, they probably feel like perhaps something there, but.
Sure. No, I mean, we've got a great relationship with him. I think he's a friend. I think he's a great, very bright guy. Obviously there is, I don't know, maybe I have some, esoteric readings into some of his stuff. But I mean, the main idea is that, I guess depending on what we're talking about.
Sure.
So I'm an admirer of his work. I think that he's brilliant guy, and that all of his takes sort of have to be reckoned with, and and because he's a friend, it's kind of easy to do that, and maybe we disagree, maybe we push in different places on the margins, but it's a very productive, it's as you said, it's productive and enjoyable.
Yeah, no, I think that like I said, a lot of Yarvin's takes might be a little too dour for the average person. It's often, hard for people, especially, people with families who are like, no, I need to fight for and protect, the future of my family and make sure that they're going to have a good life. It's hard for them to look at some of what Yarvin's predictions and just kind of go with, yeah, I can write that out. That'll be fine. But I do think it's very valuable that dialogue is happening, because that is something, like I said, Claremont is just willing to kind of have some of those discussions that other places aren't willing and are willing to have. And I think that it is valuable that the right is able to have a dialogue with some people who would not necessarily just, inside the beltway, the normal thought that you would expect out of a GOP think tanks,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Well, that's something that I think is very important. I'll speak for the folks at Claremont. I mean, I think it's very important. I mean, look. I mean, of course, we talked to Yarvin. I mean, look. He is infinitely more interesting than anything you might read in establishment rags. I mean, he's it's even so silly. It's so silly what is out there in terms of the conservative space. If you go into a lot of kind of establishment conservative media and what these folks are talking about, or I mean, who are the interesting thinkers? Who are the people with takes that make you scratch your head and say, that's really interesting. I didn't think about it that way. I mean, who? I off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I can think of a bunch of people who write pieces where I say, oh, that's very well done. And, and I may agree with it and I think it's great. But it's nothing that knocks me on my ass. It's nothing that's, it's not, as they say of jazz, the sound of surprise. And I think that it's imperative to go out looking for interesting takes. I mean, look, let's say interesting takes is maybe underselling it, but interesting, new, different perspectives. I mean, one of the fruitful things now is talking to folks, Amy Therese and some of these other folks who are coming from the left, who are coming from Marxism. Okay, fine. Agree to disagree on a whole boatload of stuff, but the take is interesting, and it's also full of vigor. And the conversation needs to be full of vigor, because we're going through a period right now of where all around us in the establishment, everything, neocons, neolibs, it's so boring. It's boring and it's submental. And one of the things that I think we are doing, and that other folks who are also kind of maybe, on the right or in this space are doing, is just trying to kind of break free of this kind of bullshit nonsense.
Yeah, I think one of the things Yarvin says, we want to make their ideas as uncool as possible as soon as possible. But yeah, I think that's interesting, because that kind of dovetails to what you were talking about with the lack of vision when it comes to a conservative activist class or right-wing activist class. It's just something that you don't see on the right, really, the way that they have on the left, and also the dialogue with the new blood. Both of those things, I think, kind of work in tandem. If you have people who see a future for themselves in a movement that with vision and the ability to like make a living off of it, or go somewhere with it, then that allows you to then develop thought in directions that didn't exist before. It allows you to have dialogues, allows you to have conversations to get people excited, bring in new ideas, get the wheels turning. And because so much of the right-wing kind of machine does not allow almost any of that right now, both on the activist side and kind of on when it comes to the thought, you really are just, like I said, it really is super stagnant. And so I think it's extremely important to facilitate both of those together if you want to see a movement really grow.
I agree, 100%.
So one of the things I also wanted to ask you about is you are definitely a big on vinyl, right? This is it seems like a big passion of yours. This is something I've kind of gotten into in the last year.
Great.
And so why don't you talk a little bit about kind of what you enjoy about vinyl, why you make that such a big thing? Why you have
Sure.
that passion?
I started collecting records again. I started buying records again in 2016. No, 2015. When I felt like I was in a place where I wasn't moving all the time, and I could manage a switch to digital. I could manage a switch from digital to something real that I could hold in my hands. I mean, I had bought a lot of vinyl in high school, but really since then I just stopped. I just kind of went to CDs and then digital, and I was in a place where I felt more like, I was more stable, and that I could start doing that again. And it's great because I've got a natural tendency to um, to have like music ADD, where I'll listen to something and then immediately I'll go and I'll something will get in my head, and I'll be distracted and move on to listening to something else and just go like this. And vinyl sort of forces you to say, okay, at the very least, for one side, for 23 minutes, I'm going to take this trip, and I'm going to put my attention here. And you can put on stuff in the background or whatever, but you have to be attentive to that 23-minute trip in some way, and then and flip it over, and then you can continue. So it's that process of slowing down and concentrating that has been really great. It's been really great. It's been educational, actually, just in terms of whenever you have to change your natural rhythm for something. It's always I think it's always good whenever you have to train yourself to change it, and then you kind of successfully do. It's a kind of a discipline, but maybe that's looking too much. Maybe that's being too grandiose about it.
No, I actually had pretty
Yeah.
much the exact, like, very similar attraction to it. It's, like you said, when everything is immediately available, when you can just, have, your iPhone play whatever, or you can just download something immediately, it loses something. There's something about the vinyl that you have to go out, you have to find it. They're more difficult. You have to make an effort. It's not immediately available. And then when you put it on, you're dedicated. You don't just throw something on, immediately switch to a different album. You actually have to listen through and hear what the artist wanted to do with it. You actually have to come back and turn it over. Just those little rituals make you actually, listen to the music more intently, pay more attention. And I feel like this gets and not, like I said, not to get too grandiose about it, but I think like this needs to be applied to almost everything in modern life at this point, right? Like, you have to. I noticed this with like church. That we had COVID, and couldn't go to church physically, and so everybody was going online. And it's really hard for a lot of people to go back because you just have the convenience. You're sitting there in your pajamas, you can make breakfast, and there's church. You're still doing the thing.
Right, you're on Twitter, and you've got church going on in the background.
Right, and eventually you realize, like, oh, I'm not making time for this anymore, and this digital having the accessibility has robbed me of something. Like, actually having this on demand and available all the time has actually made this worse, and I need to take the time to go back and make it manual, make it cost me something, slow it down so that I feel it when I do it. And I think that that's it's a small thing with vinyl, but it's something that I felt I can kind of apply in general across a bunch of different domains.
Right. No, I look. I mean, I agree. I think that's a beautiful way to put it. The other thing too is that it's nice actually having something. It's the physical experience that's just far better than and more meaningful than just pressing a button and getting what you want. And sometimes, I mean, I don't want to be without the ability to press a button and get what I want, on one hand. But on the other hand, I mean, I listen to digital music all day. But on the other hand, I want to sit down and I just want to, I mean, as you said, we're going to carve out some time for this. And also it creates a lot of new, I mean, once you get into vinyl hi-fi, it starts to create a lot of new possibilities for manipulation of sound. You can really, you have so many more variables when it comes to the sound of a record than you do off off a digital source, just because you've got the tone arm, you've got the platter, you've got the motor, you've got the cartridge, you've got the phono preamp, you've got your cables, you've got a whole bunch of stuff that you don't have with digital. I mean, digital, okay, you've got the DAC. Okay, you're done. You've got the DAC. The CD transport or whatever it is, the Bluetooth, whatever it is, you can marginally make it better, but it's not going to color the sound the way a phono preamp or a cartridge is going to color the sound. It's not. You're not going to hear a difference between a belt drive or a direct drive motor or something like that on a turntable. You will hear a difference, whereas you won't hear it on digital. So if you are somebody that delights in those different types of differences and textures of sound, then vinyl makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my wife is a very talented musician, so that's something she really appreciates, but
What
much
does she
more
play?
than I do. Everything, pretty much. Piano, guitar, bass, but sings extremely well. Is pretty much anything she puts her mind to. But yeah, no, I think it's absolutely for people who can. I can appreciate some of that, but not to the level she can. But that's absolutely an advantage as well. Actually, we had a super chat here. David Setchell, I'm sorry that I can't put up on the screen. I did find it on the YouTube stream, though, so I can still read it. But it is about vinyl here. He said, thoughts on Candid Records, especially as anti-cathedral action for Mingus and Cecil Taylor to do what they want, such as Fables or Fabius with lyrics. I hope maybe you know something of that, because that's all above my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I actually did a little thing on. We'll get back to vinyl after the little story here, but I was lucky enough to meet and kind of, let's say, become acquaintances with Nat Hentoff, who was the great jazz journalist and also great civil rights advocate and historian before his death, and of course one of the things that Hentoff did was create Candid Records as a label in I think 1959, 1960. It was a short-lived label, but everything on it was great, and it was all based on Nat's particular tastes. And he loved Mingus, and Eric Dolphy, and several other fantastic, wonderful musicians. And he got a chance to Booker Little. He got a chance to document them. So I'm not sure so if you go to the Federalist website, or if you go to my website, you will be able to find the obituary that I wrote about Nat with a bunch of Candid, my selection of my favorite Candid records, or records released on the Candid label.
Yes, and speaking of, I forgot to mention, but I do have the link to David's website in the description down below. Make sure you're clicking on that. You can find his Twitter there, his Substack. You have my favorite Substack name of all time. The Late Republic Nonsense is a fantastic name, so well
Thank
done
you.
with that. But make sure that you're following that link so you can find him on all the different social medias and everything there. But I think we're coming up in an hour, so I don't want to monopolize your time. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or get to that we didn't touch on?
I'm not sure. I mean, if you have any other, any other questions or anything you want to throw at me.
Well, I guess one thing we started talking about, but I don't feel like I explored entirely,
Mm-hmm.
with having your national security experience and background. What was your kind of focus when you were in that world that I guess you can talk about? Like, what was your area of expertise?
Sure. So I got into it because I was fascinated with, let's say, the Islamist movement, or I wanted to know as much as possible about Islamic terrorism, and that led me on a path to try to understand them in a way they understood themselves, which is of course a kind of very Straussian impulse. And so that led me to primary sources, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen to the bullshit of what what the media tells me what these guys want. I'm going to listen to what they want. And by far the most interesting for me, the most interesting and influential sort of group or subset in that universe was the Muslim Brotherhood, because they were serious people. I mean, they are serious people, and they have a literature, they have a massive pedagogy, they've got think tanks, they've got papers and mountains of books that are affiliated with their particular point of view. And one of the things that's interesting in watching the CRT debate, and I talked with some of the folks who are fighting CRT about this, is that it's immediately I understood what was going on there, because I understand the use of terms of art. Mm-hmm. And the Muslim Brotherhood had a whole bunch of terms of art that they would use, whereas you would read something and a normal person would just read it and say, okay, well, this is unobjectionable. But in fact, if you are a Brotherhood guy, that, whatever, 6 times in the paragraph, something lit up that is a sign, that is an ideological marker of a particular concept or another that they're involved in. So sort of reading that and deciphering that was something that I became fascinated with. And I did that for a long time, about a decade.
Do you feel like maybe some of the issue that the right or conservatives have pushing back on this is that, what's the right way to put this? They don't see their own civic religion, as it were. That one of the things that I think is so hard is they kind of assume a baseline of kind of their belief system, America, and what the Constitution should be, and kind of that narrative. And it seems like it's almost so on autopilot for them that their only response to someone with a counter narrative is just shock, right? And so because I think they don't understand that while it's a narrative I in many ways agree with, it is a narrative, and it does need to have some of that structure to it. It does need to have particular points that that when they're not focused on it, it leaves it open to things like critical race theory, which are willing to kind of step in and fill those roles. It understands itself maybe a little better as an ideology. And because the right often doesn't think of itself that way, and it just kind of assumes kind of like, I guess the patriotic baseline is just that, the baseline, because they don't have a grasp on the fact that they are involved in kind of a narrative warfare, it's always putting them on the back foot.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's the first reaction you get, or the first reaction that comes from being challenged by some of this stuff, is, oh my God, am I a bad person if I believe X? And that's the hot stove. That's the thing that is there to keep you from burning your hand, from asking too many questions, from picking apart too hard at what you could call the kind of mythology of the American regime. And every regime has a mythology. It's fine. It's
essential. They don't function without it.
Of course, clearly that is the case. And so once you start to ask these questions, and as you said, and once you were challenged by some of this stuff, you could go one of two ways. You could recoil in fear and horror, as frankly, a lot of the establishment conservative folks in the commentariat have done.
Mhm.
Or you could say, okay, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to try to understand this, and I don't know. I think of the phrase, uh, you don't know what time it is, or you do know what time it is. Blah blah blah. I'm going to have to come up with a kind of good way to describe that, and maybe write a piece that gets into this point. But I think everybody basically looks around and sees that the regime is in a crisis period of some kind. It's really easy, though, to say, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to go back to repeating my slogans. And, maybe if you're in the commentariat and realizing this and sort of really taking it in and kind of, acting accordingly, will make you lose your gig. It will make you, it'll make you whatever, have to, find work somewhere else, or ruin a bunch of other, personal or professional relationships that have gone on for decades, yada, yada, yada. People have a lot invested in these narratives, and they don't even understand it. They don't like it. It's not even conscious. But little by little, the crisis of the regime is getting so acute that it's getting very, very hard for all but the most stubborn folks to accept that, yeah, there's something, there's something going awry, and maybe we need to open up our thinking a little bit, in order to deal with it, or at least in order to kind of move on to the next phase. And in it, from my perspective, take what we can from this particular arrangement, political and social, and see what we can come up with later on down the line that that checks most of the boxes.
Yeah, and I think that's I think you're right that a lot more people are having a hard time denying that anymore. But one of the things that is interesting is kind of the footing that conservatives, where they think they are as opposed to where they are. I think a lot of them feel like they were the mainstream and they were in power, or they were, they represented the majority. And then in the last, 10-ish years, things kind of got out of control. There's been this revolution, and they're trying to fight back this revolution that's flared up around them. And it's really more, it feels like more of a counter revolution, right? It's more regime consolidating power than it is something that is coming into power and taking control. Trump was kind of there's a reason, Anton wrote that famous, article, right? Like the kind of the last gasp of, and that's why if you drive around my neighborhood, you'll still see Trump Pence signs up, all over the place. They never came down, because really that was a symbol of that kind of last movement. And they're just that's not going to go anywhere for them, because they feel, but I kind of lost where I was going with that. Sorry. My point being is, I think that they have a hard time understanding that they've been on the outside looking in for a while, rather than the other way around. And so they're still looking for that, that situation where someone's going to come along and roll things back 30 years and put us, kind of put us back in the place where they were comfortable, rather than understanding, like you said, we're going to need to be going to a new and different place, and we're going to need a new vision for what that's going to be, rather than just trying to beat back this current revolution and then go back to the way things were.
Right. Yeah. And look, there are folks who, as soon as you get into the liberal illiberal debate, liberal has come to mean, it's come to mean I'm a good person, and and really, really little else in many ways. And you see it when it's just people are afraid. They're really afraid of uh, they're afraid of looking at this, looking at where we are, and I mean, you'll see it. I mean, I just posted on Twitter today. People are coming to me and they're saying, no, no. There was a poll about, 2/3 of Republicans, I think, in the South want to secede from the United States. And, some of the responses from, typically, I just call them kind of spiritual boomers, if not boomers, in fact, who will just say, oh, no. What we need to do is we need to win and get rid of the leftists and beat the leftists and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just scratching my head. I'm like, what kind of a world do you live in where this is possible? I don't understand. You want to make men give birth. That will probably happen before you get back to Reaganism, or 1984 in this country, because we're a completely different country in so many ways. You don't even have to get into the demographics. 15 other ways aside from demographics, and but it's like, the other thing that happens is, if you're stuck in this particular frame, you are bound to be black-pilled. You are bound to be black-pilled, because if you have any sense of realism, that the odds of winning this are really, really slim. So it's not, it's not a football game where, if you lose, you lose. You reset and you play another game. And that's where a white pill becomes possible. And, and I'm just trying to, whatever I do, however way I can contribute, on Twitter or Substack or wherever, I'm just trying to pull people from the black pill of the current regime to the white pill of, something that may be possible in the future.
Yeah, that actually dovetails well. We got another super chat here real quick. Bolero 393, thank you for the donation, sir. Says, thoughts of what Claremont is doing for proletariats who don't play on the DC level but want to maintain order and preserve our heritage. So, I mean, obviously, there's only so much you guys can do, but I think there is a general, a lot of people are worried about order, understandably. When you see riots break out across the country, when you see police not responding, you see National Guard used to lock down DC in a moment, but they can't be bothered to protect your average neighborhood. I think a lot of people are worried about what comes next on that level, and obviously they will be looking for people to say how what can we do? And I know a lot of people specifically in South Africa right now going, through what's going on there. And I know a lot of them have been in this situation where, like, we just have neighborhood watches, we just make sure meet your neighbor, make sure you take care of each other, make sure you're building community bonds. You have ways to, get food, get things, in case things go sideways, you're not completely dependent on the state and your neighbor isn't a stranger. And so at least, that's what I hear a lot from people who are currently in that kind of situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's that on that kind of micro level, which is for sure, meet your neighbor and make sure that you have what you need in case shit goes sideways. Absolutely. The question of proto elites is a good one. I mean, look, depending on what kind of elite, depending on what you do, what you want to do, what is your skill set, someone has use for you. The biggest thing that I can recommend is find a group of friends, find comrades, allies, build a small community. You don't even have to all live in the same place, but that would be great. I mean, it's probably ideal to live in the same place. I mean, I'm not talking about a compound, but I'm talking about, the ability to go and, maybe see, your folks once a week, once every 2 weeks or something like that. Make them a part of your physical space and physical interaction. That's really important. It's very, very important. And I mean, with Claremont, I mean, we're split all over the country, but we exist like probably everybody else in Signal chats, and that's really good. It goes all day long, and it feels like we are, we're all together all the time, and it's very, very productive. It's also, it's also good shit talking, but it's very, very productive in general, and folks need to have kind of overlapping conversations like this, and then, once you've put together a community, once you've built up a community with some comrades, then you can figure out, who's the, where's your skill set, and what does it do, and it really all depends. There's going to be room for everybody. There's definitely going to be room for every possible conceivable skill set here. I mean, if the deeper question is, okay, do you go and do you, for example, if you're a young man, do you go and enlist in the military? I mean, my friend Indian Bronson has a really worthwhile piece at his Substack about enlisting. And I mean, I think he makes a lot of great points, which is, the main one, which is just like, okay, you're a mercenary. They have a lot of great, valuable stuff to convey to you and for you to learn. Learn it, grab it, take it. Looking at other situations, employment or other things, in the same way is good. And, come up with a plan for your life. Come up with a plan. Like, how am I going to help this movement? How am I going to help my neighbors? How am I going to help my comrades and my closest allies? And these are things to think about. I wish I had a definitive, guidebook, but I guess the nature of the unknown means that you can't really have a definitive guidebook. You can only kind of push in one direction.
Yeah, but I think that is very valuable advice, because this is what I tell people all the time when they ask me, like, what should I be doing? Where should I be going? Where do I start? It's, guys, there really is not a course charted for you here, and so it's got to be an adventure. You've got to get out there, and look for people. People will help you along the way. When people see you're genuine, when people see you're putting in the work, when they see that you mean what you say, and you're going to be willing to put in time, they'll invest in you. And so, but you gotta take that first step. No one's going to pick you up off the couch and say, hey, start writing papers, start, networking, start getting on Twitter, start making videos, start doing whatever. No one's going to find you and select you for that. You've got to get out there, put yourself out there. And once you start building up those networks, the opportunities will come. And like you said, especially when you look at things like employment, that is going to be so essential in the coming years. It's going to be so essential for you to have a place to go where someone can find, an option for you in employment, that kind of thing, get your kind of people into the right kind of places. That's really crucial. And so, like I said, first thing is just taking those steps. There's not going to be some rote guide for you to follow. No one's going to lay that all out for you. But if you make the effort, people will notice.
Right. And a couple kind of values to keep in mind. One, and the big one is probably autonomy, which is at the end of the day, you don't want to be canceled down the line. You don't want to be beholden to, essentially the Chinese government, in terms of what you can say or do later on. So do things with that in mind. And of course, these things don't have to be political. So, for example, you're like, hey, I want to create a YouTube channel where I do vinyl unboxings. I don't know, maybe you'll make $1 million. Great, fantastic. Then figure out, okay, how am I going to use this network, this contraption that I've built, in order to advance the cause.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Remembering that people still have to live real lives and you can still do things outside of the political sphere that then you can use to better, the cause in general. It's absolutely something to keep in mind. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. But I want to thank everybody for coming by and watching. Like I said, make sure you're probably already following Dave on Twitter. He's got a massive following. But if for some reason you're not, or you haven't read his Substack or checked him out on his other stuff, make sure you're following that link in the description so you can check out his webpage and everything that he's doing there. But thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's great to do it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I'll see you later, and we'll talk to you next time.